where do I even begin with my thoughts on Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice? There's so much to cover. There's so much to talk about. And at the same time, there's too much that I can't give away. I suppose we can start with the basics. It was developed and published, as this is an indie game, believe it or not, by Ninja Theory. You might remember that name from Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, DMC: The Devil May Cry reboot. They're the ones who you have to thank for Hellblade, because Hellblade is an amazing game. And I try not to say that lightly. I try not to praise without merit games that I enjoy. There's a lot of games I enjoy that aren't really that good. I just like them for some silly reason or another. But Hellblade, Hellblade is, I'm on the fence, but I want to call this game a damn masterpiece in terms of its storytelling and character design. It is gorgeous, not just in the graphical department, but in the art style of the world that you're in, and the way that you can connect with the protagonist, Senua. It is not amazing in every regard. It falls short in some areas, but it is made up for in what I find to be the most important parts. I was talking with my mother the other day. She asked if I had seen any good movies lately. And admittedly, I don't watch many movies or television, and so I said, I haven't watched any movies, but there's this game that I just played that reminds me of one. Hellblade is one of those games that will instantly come to mind when people say video games aren't art. They can't tell real stories. They're mind-numbing. They're thoughtless. They are wastes of our time. Forgive me if I ramble a bit in this long thoughts video, but this is not a typical game, and I can't really compare it to any other. It is unique in its feeling as it is in its design. It is a game that does not make me think, oh, this is just like such and such game. And the way that it's portrayed, I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to show you too much. That's why the footage that you see here is just me going through the very first things that happen in the game. And you're missing so much because you can't hear. The best way to describe Hellblade, if I had to do it in a single sentence, is a narrative-driven, third-person action puzzle game based in Norse mythology. But emphasis on narrative-driven. This is a game that's almost like a movie that you play. And normally, we get that phrase in video games. It's cinematic, and it has a dirty connotation to it because of how it's used and overused and abused. But this game, Hellblade, is the kind of game where you can say this is a cinematic game. This game has a film-like quality to it. But that is an endorsement of the title, not a dismissal of its strengths. I was surprised by how cinematic this game was. I thought it would be more gameplay focused. But you want to play to see what happens next. You want to play to see where you'll go. You'll play to see where your path takes you, where your journey leads you. Because of how interesting everything is. And because you want to see Senua succeed. What an interesting character we have in Senua. Very atypical of games, of really any medium. Because Hellblade, as one of its pillars, one of its foundational strengths and structures, is how the game deals with Senua's mental illness. Senua is a sufferer of psychosis. It's an abnormal mental condition that involves a loss of contact with reality. People who suffer from psychosis have symptoms like delusions and catatonia, thought disorders. They have impairments to social cognition, but they suffer from hallucinations as well. Auditory hallucinations, particularly experiences of hearing voices, are the most common and prominent feature of psychosis. hallucinated voices may talk about or to the person, Senua, in this case, and it can involve several speakers with distinct personalities all at once. These hallucinations can be particularly distressing when they're derogatory, or when they're commanding, when they're preoccupying her thoughts, and yours as well. Because you see the world through her eyes. You experience Hellblade as Senua. You're not someone else just along for the ride. The game presents you as a player, you, the one at the mouse and keyboard or the controller. This is on PlayStation as well. It presents you as someone who's there. You're a character. You're someone with her on this journey. You're not removed from her world. You're not safe from her hallucinations. You don't get to just run away from her experiences. You don't get to make the voices go away. The voices never go away. They're always there, in her head, and you have to hear them too. You have to hear those voices as they mock you and deride you. As you try to figure out a puzzle, they'll say you're stuck. They'll ask if you're lost. They'll say all hope is gone. They say you can't do it. They say you'll fail. They say this is a fool's errand. And Senua looks you in the eye, like you're there with her, and you feel like you're a part of the world. It means a lot, because it's very strange in games. It's very strange in movies too. You see, in games and movies, oftentimes we're an observer looking down at events as they unfold. We see this especially in the movies. In the movies, you're just there for the ride. You watch things as they happen. You don't control anything. You're not really there. You suspend the disbelief that you're looking at this universe that's occurring in front of you with a level of first-person perspective, like you're some invisible specter that no one else can see or notice. It's this detachment from the narrative unfolding before you that, oddly enough, helps us to be immersed in it. You're there as a viewer, but don't think about it too much. You're not really there. Not as a participant, not as a player, not as someone who has any control. So it's so strange when Senua looks you in the eye. You know the last moments in Revenant? Not to spoil anything, but it's kind of like that. When the character looks at you. It draws you in ways that a lot of other things simply can't do. Not everybody will feel this way. I can wax on and on about how I felt immersed in this game, unlike so many others, because of the way your presence in the game is told from that narrative standpoint. And she doesn't just casually look at you here and there. You feel like you're in her head. Like I said, everything in this game you're seeing through her eyes. Her perception is how you view the universe. And the fact that you see this game, you see this world through the eyes of someone who suffers from a mental condition like psychosis, it is of paramount importance to the experience. So much so that when I was gathering my thoughts to make this video, and this is a tough video to make, but as I was gathering my thoughts to make this video, I wondered, wait a second, how... You have to look at the whole game through this lens. You have to look at this whole game through the lens of somebody who suffers from psychosis. It's central in so many ways, but how many ways? Do the way the puzzles, do the way that the enemies, do the way that the mechanics, does the way that everything comes together, how much of it is because that's the way it is, and how much of it is because it's only there because she perceives it to be there? What's real? What isn't real? What voices are there and which ones really aren't? How much of this world is magic and gods and curses and beasts? And how much of it is just her mind filling in those deep, dark blanks with something that she can understand? I'll leave that to you to decide and figure out on your own. Because as you play this game, well, maybe it's not the best title for those who need a sense of catharsis, who have to understand everything, who have to have all the answers when the curtains finally draw closed. You don't just walk away from Hellblade without asking questions. This isn't a game that's just over. It doesn't get wrapped up with a neat little bow and then you could run along like nothing happened. Senua feels too real. You feel too involved. You feel like a character in her story, in her quest, in her journey. This is a love story, after all. Her story. And maybe I should just leave it at that. Maybe that's all I need to say about Hellblade's story. Maybe that's all that needs to be said. Maybe, hell, I know the best way to go into this game is knowing as little as possible and to just let you experience everything that happens along the way so that you can draw your own conclusions and so that you can see the world through the eyes of someone who suffers. Because Hellblade, this is not a happy game. No, no, no. Hellblade is a grim game. It's a dark game. It's full of suffering. It's full of sacrifice. It's full of pain and sorrow. It mirrors the Norse mythology that is cloaking it. I could tell you more, absolutely. I could tell you loads more. I could tell you what to expect. I could tell you what's a trick, what's real. I could tell you the questions I still have to ask myself. But I'm not. And you'll have to trust me on this. The less you know about the story, the more you pick up along the way, the better it will be for you as a player. But there's a lot of things I can talk to you about the game itself, not just the story and the world and the characters. But before I go on about that, I do want to say that I have an immense appreciation for what Team Ninja did here. Sorry, Ninja Theory, my apologies. I have an immense appreciation for them. That warning at the beginning, whenever you boot up the game, you see it. This game contains representations of psychosis. People with experience of psychosis, as well as professionals in psychiatry, have assisted in these depictions. How often is it? And it's not unheard of, really. But how often is it? No examples come to my mind personally, but how often is it that you experience a game or a movie in such a vivid way through someone who has these kind of conditions? It makes you feel sympathetic towards them. It puts their suffering, it puts their condition into an understandable way. A video game is an excellent way for this medium to be explored, I feel. And so, again, I really feel appreciative to Ninja Theory for taking this element of reality and trying to show us the world through the eyes of someone who experiences these things in their reality. And in the menus and in the screens before you get there, they're very open, Ninja Theory is, about helping people who suffer with this kind of disorder. And that's not something that they had to do. That's something they could have skipped and nobody would have said a word. I don't know what it's like to have psychosis. I don't know anyone who does have it. But I think to people who do, to people who know people who do, I think that goes a long way. I think that means a great deal. And I'm glad that they did it. So let's talk about the game itself. The game, as I said, is a narrative-driven, third-person puzzle action game, right? That in and of itself is nothing new. The way it's portrayed is. It's not a very exciting game. There are long swaths of gameplay that have you simply wandering around, getting to a certain zone, a certain area, looking for quote-unquote keys, for lack of a better term. In order to get through a door, you have to play a little hide-and-seek. You have to go up and down and look around for shadows and symbols and shapes in the environment in order to unlock doors. If those doors are locked at all. Something to think about, I suppose. They're locked to Senua, and maybe that's all that matters. Maybe that's the point. I call this a puzzle game, but this is no Myst, and this is no Riven. No, no, no. It's something that you can enjoy. It's the kind of puzzle that isn't difficult, but requires a level of engagement. You don't accidentally stumble upon the answers. It just takes a little bit of effort. Not too much, it's not going to hurt your head. I wouldn't call it necessarily a puzzle game before anything else, but it's something to bide the time. It's something that is, well, topical, based on the game's thematics. It's very much a game about exploration. The exploration that drives you is your own desire to see the world, to see it realized through her eyes, to see what happens next. And it helps that the game is absolutely gorgeous. Shockingly so. I was surprised at how good looking this game is. Senua's face, her clothes, her skin, the effects of the water, and all of the other distortions that occur in the world because that is the way that Senua perceives the world. Like it said, people with experience of psychosis as well as professionals in psychiatry have assisted in the depictions that you're going to see in this game. It adds a great deal of realism when you play the game with that in mind. That this isn't fantasy to everybody. This is something a lot of people have to go through every day, perhaps. I don't know much about mental illnesses or psychiatry. I'm not going to pretend to. I'm just going by what they say. And how it made me feel when I played the game. It made her feel all the more human. Because Senua is such an amazing protagonist because of that. She's broken. She suffers. She is in pain. She cries out. She anguishes. Part of your ability to connect with Senua as a character comes down to the immense talent that went into her acting work. Senua is played by Melina Juergens, and it is through Melina's immense talent that we are able to connect with Senua as a character. I felt like I was legitimately watching a movie. The animations are fantastic, of immense quality, and they don't break that uncanny valley. You see Senua as a human being. Her expressions and the emotions and the voice work that she does, it is top-notch. It is incredible. I can't give it a praiseworthy enough review. Based on that alone, this game is worth seeing. Not just the way that she walks around in the world. You've been watching me jog and go up and go down and just walk forwards and look here and there. That's all excellent. It all is. But in the scenes when you see her face and when you see her converse, the technical skill that was used to turn just pixels on a screen into what seems to be a living, breathing character that you feel for and that you can empathize with, it says a lot about how far we've come as an industry. Senua seems like she could be you and I. Someone who suffers and someone who's trying to overcome that. And it's important that the animations are done well. It's important that the world is graphically impressive because there's a lot of walking around. There's a lot of you going here and there and climbing a ladder and following a path and looking at this and that. Most importantly, listening, but in seeing everything around you. And the depictions of hell, Helheim, the depictions of mythological beasts and deities, and everything else that you see in the world of Hellblade, it draws you in really well. Now, I played this game on SLI 1080 Ti's with a good CPU, basically a really good computer. And graphics aren't everything, I'll be the first to admit it. But damn, when you've got a really good computer and you're running this game at very high settings, as high as they'll go, 1440p, when you've got the headset on and you can hear the voices and the sounds and the effects, and when everything looks as good as it does, man, very few times have I said graphics really add to the experience, but Hellblade may be the primo example that will always come to my mind. I will say that the experience is better on my machine than some typical PlayStation. I'm not putting you down if you have one. What I'm saying is, this is a game where being able to enjoy it in the highest fidelity possible, it makes a difference. It really does. And people who play this game on really high-end hardware, I think you'll walk away from this game enjoying it more because of it. Because it has that cinematic quality to it. Because the more real that she looks, the easier it is, I feel, to connect with her. It's not a blanket statement of all characters in games, but I feel it applies to Hellblade. So you listen to the story, you see the few characters that they are, You get immersed in the world of Norse mythology, and you learn a lot along the way. The stones you saw me interacting with are narrations of stories and tales. They have a topical quality to them. You'll enjoy listening to them. They teach you the mythological stories, and they are relevant to Hellblade itself, so it's worthy of paying attention. But the combat is something that you'll be doing a bit of. It doesn't feel like it's overdone, which I will say is a good quality that this game has. And what's interesting is that the combat is actually Hellblade's weakest element, which as you look at it, you might be wondering, this looks really good, but it's actually quite simple, and it gets very repetitive, and there are ways to just cheese enemies. This ties in with the quality of animation work that's done with the rest of the game. The game looks and feels better than it probably really is because of how high quality the animations are and the reactions of enemies and to how Senua moves and attacks and does pretty much everything. And with the exception of the small blurb I cut out right before this combat started, you're watching the game as it is presented to you. I found the lack of obvious button prompts and control schemes to be an interesting and ultimately somewhat positive way to immerse you into the combat. This doesn't play like a video game. That's one thing I think it's important to stress. This game doesn't you're playing it. Senua does what your controls on your keyboard and mouse. It's a game, but it doesn't feel like a game. I didn't feel like I was playing a game. That's what's so weird. It was so immersive to me, even in combat, that it didn't feel like a game. It didn't feel like I was playing a video game. But I mean that in a positive way. One interesting facet about this game as well, though, is how it handles permadeath. I haven't looked up information about this, and I'm not going to speak too much on it, and I'm sure you could go online and find out just what the limits are. How much can you fail? How much can you lose? How much progress is gone? But I think that not knowing that adds to the tension of her quest. You feel like Senua has a lot to lose. This is a game where there's no turning back. There's not going home. There's only pressing forward. Senua struggles to succeed, to press onward. And the way that this game handles permadeath, at least in the way that you perceive it, it makes the times when you do fail feel very real, very impactful. It reminds you of her vulnerability as a human being, and it really makes the times you fail seem meaningful, because you can't just lose and lose and lose and keep on going. Every time you die, every time you fail, every time you succumb, you'll see that rot grow on her, and it will stick with you for the rest of the game, and you will be constantly reminded of how much rot is inside of you, and how much further it has to go. New enemy types and varieties appear as the game progresses, and ultimately, the combat, as I said before, is the weakest part of this game. It's not bad, it really isn't. It plays okay, it's fine. However, it's not exactly great. For instance, Senua locks on a certain target, and that's the target that she's locked on until she sort of decides to lock onto a different target. There are no camera controls in combat. None. Zero. Zilch. There's none. There are no camera controls in combat. She's focused on one target at a time, and that's what you get. And sometimes in this game, it is downright frustrating that you can't maneuver well enough, and that you can't see the enemies, that you don't know if they're behind you or to the side of you, because you are just homed in on that one enemy. And as far as I know, there's no way to swap. Now, if you put another enemy between the one that she's focused on, she starts attacking him, and she puts a bead on a new target. But prioritizing targets is very difficult because some enemies are definitely more deadly than others. Some are quicker, some are slower, some are more deadly. You want to take them out first. Like I said, it can get frustrating, downright frustrating. But luckily, the combat is not overdone. And it's not meant to just be filler either. It feels like it's meaningful. And I will say that the boss fights are particularly, even though the combat is weak, or at least the weakest part of the game, I feel like the boss fights are well done. The Beast, in particular, was very well done. But in the combat, just like in wandering through the world and solving puzzles and navigating the environment, Senua's Psychosis is always there. The voices are always there. Whenever you get hit, they might make a comment or remark. Whenever an enemy is almost dead, they will talk about it to you inside of your head. This game benefits greatly from playing with headphones, and they say that when you start up the game, you should play this with headphones, and you should. You should buy headphones for this game. You should not be playing with speakers. Speakers are for normies. There are parts of the game where you have to follow sounds, for instance, and without good, directional hearing, that can become difficult. This is a game that's designed to be played with with headphones around your noggin. So I've talked about the combat. You smack people with your sword. You don't, and it's not an RPG, right? At least not in the sense we think about it. Yes, you're playing the role of Senua, yada yada, but you don't level up. You don't get experience. You don't unlock new abilities and new combos and finishers and things like that. That's not really how the game works. You got what you got, and they give you what they give you, and you go through the combat, you fight the enemies off, and you proceed with the story, and you see what happens. And you go find out what the next struggle she has to overcome is. The game also has no replay value to me. Absolutely none. The game has zero replay value. Unless you're getting footage for a video on YouTube. But for the most part, you're paying $30 for about an 8 hours journey, and then there's really no reason for you to ever play it again. There are no real collectibles. There are no real hidden secrets in the game, as far as I know, unless they're so secret I didn't even know there were secrets in this game to find. Maybe there is. But I feel no desire to play the game again because the game is about the story, and when you know how the story goes, it really loses pretty much all of its impact. But again, the game is not $60, it's $30. And it does have the polish and appeal of a right proper AAA game. But Hellblade is an indie game. Ninja Theory produced and developed it. And this is what's interesting, this is so good about the game. It has something it wants to focus on. It doesn't go beyond what it can accomplish. It has a theme. It has a story. It has a character. And it sticks with those, and it focuses on them. And as a result, you get a very refined, a very cohesive experience. Anyway, I've rambled on for about almost half an hour now about Hellblade, and this was a very difficult video to make, because it's so hard to talk about this game, because what's so weird is that the story is what's so good, and experiencing it is what's so good, and you can't hear the background of the gameplay. So you have no idea what you're missing, because so much of the game has to do with, the auditory cues and the voices and Senua's speech and the narration. It's so strange I have to make a video about a game where the story's the most important part, but it's the part that I have to talk about the least, because the less you know, the better it is when you experience it. I haven't watched other people's reviews. I know it's doing very highly ratings-wise. It's doing good on Metacritic, on Steam, everywhere. Seems to be giving it high praise. I haven't really read these reviews. To be honest, I would be careful if you do. I don't want them to give away too much. I'm not trying to say that you should only listen to my thoughts on video and nobody else's, but like I said, the more you hear about the game, the more you'll learn, and the more you learn, the less impactful things are in the game when they happen. If you're looking for a game that tells a story, this is the game for you. If you're looking for a game that immerses you in a world, this is the game for you. If you finally want a game where you give a damn about the protagonist, where you care about making it through and completing the journey, then this is the game for you. If you don't mind a bit of walking, if you don't mind moments of calm, extended periods of just wandering about, soaking it all in, listening, then this is the game for you. I also want to give huge props to the soundtrack of this game. The soundtrack was made, and forgive me if I'm butchering your name, but the soundtrack to Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was done by Andy LaPlegua and David Garcia Diaz. And they nailed it with the music of this game. Dear God, they nailed it. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Rarely are there times in a game where the soundtrack highlights the experience so much. Hellblade is among the finest examples of how you can craft music that doesn't distract you from the game, but enhances everything that you experience and that you see. The haunting ambient noise that can occur when you're exploring or looking about, when you're experiencing the narrative as it plays out in front of you, it does what a good soundtrack should do, and it adds to the experience. It doesn't take away or distract. It's the kind of thing you get when you try to not be everything for everyone, but when you try to tell a story, a definitive story about characters in a setting, something that's not meant to be experienced by everybody, but that's meant to be what it's meant to be. I hope Hellblade does really well, because I want to see them making more games like this. There is a market for this. There are people who want these kinds of experiences, who want these narrative-driven games about characters that you can care about and empathize with. And for all those reasons, I highly recommend Hellblade. And I hope that you will support this game, because it deserves it. No. I gotta do more. The video was gonna be over there. I mean, I tweeted out that the video was done and would be posted later on. It wrapped up, fade to black, yada yada. But I went to go eat, and I had more thoughts. And I figured that I wanted to at least end the video here with a little explanation of everything. Kind of sum it all up in a good way. Kind of explain my thought process here. I've praised the animations, and I've praised the actress, the characters, the story, all that stuff. And I've left it very ambiguous by design. So that if you do get this game, and I hope you do, that it will, be better for you because of it. But the reasons that I really like this game aren't just because of the things that you can see, but because this game made me feel a great deal. Senua is such a fantastically well-done character. The fact you care about her and her future, the fact you care about her completing her quest, that you are concerned for her, that when she suffers you feel bad, when she's in anguish you feel bad for her. I think it goes so long to really rounding out this story, and since it is driven by the story, and she's the protagonist, it's essential that they get this right, and they did. But a lot of the praise that I have for this game is because of the way it just made me feel, the way I connected to it, how on a personal level, I love this game so much. And it's tough to explain that. And it's tough to really objectively get others to understand that. Because I can see someone picking up this game and not liking it at all. Maybe they think it's boring or something like that. Or it's too confusing for them. Or they need more semblance of sense as things unfold. I felt so immersed, and I felt so much care and sympathy towards Senua. And other people might not experience those to the same levels that I do. But this game just connected with me. And so much of my praise for this game, and so much of my encouragement for others to buy it and play it and enjoy it, stems from the fact that it made me feel a certain way. It all came together just so well. So just really keep that in mind as you think about buying it. That a lot of my recommendation of this game is built on the idea that it made me feel a certain way towards it. Another thing that this is something I actually don't like about the game, is actually the name, Hellblade. The marketing for this game, what little I decided to take a look at, actually after I bought the game, I could see how one would mistake this for like a hack and slash game that's far more focused on action. It's called Hellblade, when I think a different name would suit it better. Because it's not really about the sword. In fact, the sword is just a tool. It's a means to an end. It's not about the weapon. It's about the character and the struggle and the sacrifice and the sorrow. It has that feeling of an old school epic where the hero, and this is central to a lot of Norse mythology as well, but the hero has to sacrifice. The hero has to suffer. That is part of his challenge. That is part of his trial. This game could have gone horribly wrong, and you see that. You could see all the places where the game could be horribly wrong, but it focuses on the narrative. It focuses on telling that story. You could wander around and be looking for collectibles and have a little number popped up. You found one of 3 voodoo dolls or whatever, or you found a super secret whatever it is, or you pick up items and health potions where you level up and get experience and you get new moves. It could have, where it had a health bar across the top of your screen or a compass rose. I wonder if this game, as it was in development, if they were thinking about giving it that broad appeal, that action adventure hack and slash feel that the game does not have currently, but it could have. They focused on telling a story, and they focused on making a world with characters that's interesting. They focused on telling a story. And that's something I feel a lot of games don't do. Where there's a story that's there, but it's buried behind all this filler, all this unnecessary crap and garbage that gets in the way. And if they thought about doing that, then I'm so glad that they did not, because this game, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, is a gem. It really is a diamond in the rough. And I really hope this game does well, because it is a good game first and foremost. But because I want this game's success to encourage developers to make these kinds of experiences. To tell stories, to not be afraid to kind of push the boundaries. To try things, and to don't make a game that's for everybody, that just gives all who play it this watered down taste of what it could be, but to give people who are looking for something that unique and interesting experience that they crave. Now, I'm stopping there, this time for realsies. Look, I really enjoyed this game. And I think a lot of you will too, and I highly recommend it. Again, it's only $30, and I think that they did just a phenomenal job and a wonderful example of how good video game storytelling can be. Go buy Hellblade, please.